let's talk about Sasscore. Sasscore, best described as Screamo's Tina-smoking circuit-gay younger brother. Just like how the scene started with Revolution Summer, emos in the late 90s began to believe the scene was becoming too toxically masculine and macho, thinking that it was diverging from its original sense of ethics. This time, however, instead of deciding to create something more contemplative and thoughtful, they decided to go flamboyantly gay and disrespectfully erotic. The genre primarily stemmed from post-hardcore bands like At the Drive-In, The Jesus Lizard, and Minutemen, and scrams bands like Antioch Arrow, Angel Hair, and Drive Like Jehu, but also pulled from punk bands like Nation of Ulysses and LeShock, and mathcore bands like Botch and Dazzling Killman. It also incorporated influences from things like disco, jazz, blues, funk, just about anything that you could put in there. Following this, from 1999 to 2002, we would get our first wave of actual Sasscore music, including the Blood Brothers, the Crimson Curse, the Sawtooth Grin, X Models, and Orchid's self-titled album. Now in 2003, we really started to see the genre pick up, with the genre splitting itself off into two main types of Sasscore, the first maintaining more of its post-hardcore and screamo roots. This side of the scene would also incorporate more influences like punk and disco, and would include bands like Black Eyes and Albatross, The Sick Lipstick, Holy Molar, and Arab on Radar. On the other side of the scene, White Belt. This side of the scene decided to forego their post-hardcore influences in favor of math grind. Bands in this style would include the Number 12 Looks Like You, Ed Gain, The Locust, and Daughters, who I mentioned specifically because you should avoid them, and if you're checking out the genre, you will inevitably find it. As a little aside, the terms white belt and Sasscore are typically used interchangeably. I am just making the distinction to make this easier to talk about. We would then get the real meat of the Sasscore scene from 2004 to 2010. On the post-hardcore side of things, we would get bands like XBXRX, The Mei Shi, The Plot to Blow Up the Eiffel Tower, Rapider Than Horsepower, Call Me Lightning, The John Benet, Femme Fatale, The Chinese Stars, and Meth and Goats. On the white belt grindcore side of things, there's bands like Cloacal Kiss, Tower of Rome, Destroyer Destroyer, Heavy Heavy Lolo, Fear Before the March of Flames, Duck Duck Goose, Head Wound City, Me and Him Call It Us, and Circle Takes a Square. Those last two bands are a little bit on the line, but the difference between white belt grindcore and grinding emo violence pretty much just comes down to whether or not the vocalist is gyrating their hips on stage. Now, the scene would eventually die for about a half decade, but between 2016 and 2018, the band started to come back, release new music, go on tour again, and to this day, you can still see the majority of the most popular bands from the scene on tour. And that leads us to our current wave in the scene, including bands like Dot Gift from God, See You Space Cowboy, The Callous Dowboys, Steak Sauce Mustache, P.S. You're Dead, For Your Health, and Thought Crime. This is my favorite subgenre of all time. It's energetic and subversive and offensive, just dripping with disrespect for authority and self-assuredness. With blistering rhythms and over-the-top vocals, it has the spirit of youth, as Mike Guy would say, and is what hardcore's all about. And if there are any other subgenres that you would like to hear me talk about like this, please let me know.